Welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the most profound and controversial ideas in philosophy, Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil, which she introduced in her book Eichmann in Jerusalem. Arendt's work provides a chilling examination of how ordinary people can become complicit in extraordinary evil. To understand this concept, we first need to know the background. In 1961, Adolf Eichmann, a high-ranking Nazi officer, was put on trial in Jerusalem for his role in organizing the Holocaust. Eichmann had been responsible for ensuring the logistics of transporting Jews to concentration camps. He was captured by Israeli agents after fleeing to Argentina following World War II, and his trial drew global attention. What struck many about Eichmann during the trial was that he didn't appear to be a sadistic monster. Instead, he seemed like a very ordinary man, a bureaucrat focused on his work, uninterested in the political or ideological motivations of the Nazis. It was this very ordinariness that led Arendt to formulate her theory of the banality of evil. Arendt argued that Eichmann's participation in the Holocaust wasn't driven by deep hatred or malice. Instead, he was a man who failed to think critically about his actions, a person who didn't engage with the moral consequences of his decisions. Eichmann was a cog in the Nazi machine, and according to Arendt, he became a perpetrator of great evil, not because he was inherently evil, but because he was thoughtless and blindly obeyed authority. Arendt's central idea is that evil does not always manifest in monstrous forms. Instead, it can appear in the form of bureaucratic efficiency and the willingness to follow orders without questioning the moral implications. For Eichmann, his failure wasn't just in his actions, but in his lack of thought. He wasn't an ideologue or a psychopath, but simply a man who didn't ask, "What are the consequences of my actions?" Arendt's phrase, "the banality of evil," refers to this kind of thoughtlessness, where ordinary people become capable of committing atrocities simply by failing to think critically about what they're doing. This concept challenged traditional notions of evil. We often think of evil as something that is the result of personal malice, something that comes from a deep, burning hatred or madness. But Arendt's analysis reveals that ordinary people, just like you or me, can become perpetrators of evil when they stop questioning authority and lose sight of the broader ethical consequences of their actions. Arendt makes it clear that Eichmann's failure was not an emotional one, but an intellectual one, his inability or refusal to think about the morality of his actions. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of Arendt's theory, the danger of blind obedience. Arendt argues that in totalitarian systems, people are encouraged to suspend their personal judgment and moral responsibility in favor of obedience to the state. Eichmann, who saw himself as a mere bureaucrat following orders, represents how a society can create conditions where individuals don't question the system they're part of. The dehumanization of others, the subordination of personal moral responsibility to institutional orders, and the mechanization of mass violence become possible when individuals see themselves as mere parts of a larger machine. Arendt's banality of evil doesn't let individuals off the hook, however. She argues that Eichmann was guilty, not because he was some extraordinary villain, but because he chose to remain thoughtless. His failure to engage in moral reflection made him complicit in the suffering and death of millions. This is where Arendt's theory becomes so unsettling. It's not just that Eichmann was a bad person, it's that his evil arose from his refusal to think, from his blind participation in a system that dehumanized others. His ordinariness made his actions more terrifying because it demonstrated how easily an individual can become part of a larger, destructive system. Now, what can we learn from Arendt's idea of the banality of evil today? First, it's a reminder of the importance of critical thinking and personal responsibility. Arendt urges us not to fall into routines or blindly follow orders, especially when those orders involve harming others. It's easy to go along with the system, to ignore our moral obligations if we're told it's just part of the job or the way things are done. But Arendt reminds us that each of us has a responsibility to think for ourselves, to examine the consequences of our actions, and to resist the urge to obey without questioning. Another important lesson is the danger of conformity and obedience in any hierarchical or authoritarian system. While totalitarian regimes like Nazi Germany are extreme examples, Arendt's analysis highlights how systems of power can create environments in which ordinary people stop questioning what they're doing. Whether in the workplace, in government, or in social structures, we must be vigilant about the ways authority pressures us to surrender our moral judgment. Moreover, Arendt's analysis sheds light on the importance of moral courage. Being willing to stand up against an unjust system, to question authority, and to act according to our principles is what ultimately protects us from being complicit in evil. It's easy to fall into the trap of justifying harmful actions by saying, "I'm just doing my job," or "I'm just following orders." But Arendt's warning is clear: such justifications are not enough. Arendt also makes us confront the idea that evil doesn't always come from a few monstrous individuals. It can come from an entire system, a bureaucracy, or a collective failure of thought. This is a particularly relevant point in today's world, where we continue to face situations where people are complicit in harmful practices without critically examining the impact of their actions. Whether it's corporate exploitation, environmental degradation, or even everyday prejudices, we must resist the temptation to accept these wrongs as just the way things are done. In conclusion, Arendt's concept of the banality of evil serves as a profound reminder that evil isn't always dramatic or spectacular. It can appear in the most mundane forms, in bureaucratic processes, and in the failure to think about the moral consequences of our actions. Her work challenges us to recognize the power of thoughtlessness and the dangers of blind obedience. It urges us to cultivate critical thinking, moral courage, and personal responsibility in order to resist becoming complicit in systems that dehumanize others. Ultimately, the banality of evil teaches us that the most dangerous forms of evil may be those that come from ordinary people who simply fail to reflect on the consequences of their actions.